I'd like to welcome everybody back to part two with the Honorable Stacy Scott. And Stacy, we're going to talk to very interesting topic to start with, war stories, interesting matters that you're willing to share with us. We'd love to hear them because I know you've got so many.
Yes, there's definitely a lot of war stories in this line of work. One that I would like to talk about is the case I mentioned earlier, which was a DUI manslaughter case where the driver of a van of a state-owned facility here in town called Charlie was driving a van full of residents or patients of the facility. The tire blew out, the van flipped, several residents died. And after the fact, the driver's blood was tested and there was found to be levels of THC and the metabolite of THC, which is called carboxy-THC, in her blood, and very low levels of alcohol, way below the legal limit. So the primary intoxicant that the state alleged caused her, to the accident basically was marijuana. And so this was really a case of first impression, really nationwide, because the state attempted to elicit expert testimony as to the recency of use of the marijuana by the driver, and whether to offer an opinion based on blood work done after the fact as to whether the driver was impaired by marijuana at the time of the driving. And so, this was novel. The science of THC in the human body prior to that was basically, at least the anecdotal science was pretty consistent with the science, which was, well, if you test positive, it just means you smoked sometime in the last couple weeks, right, or 30 days. And that's based on urine test and even a gas chromatograph test, it's just showing the presence. So what the toxicologists were testifying to here was something deeper than that, which was, we can tell by the level of THC as compared to the level of the metabolite, and at the time of the accident, that the levels were approximately this, that must mean that she smoked marijuana within X number of hours. And yes, we believe that this level of THC in the human bloodstream would equate to an impairment similar to, like, with blood alcohol or breath alcohol. 0.8 is the legal limit, right? And the reason why 0.8 is the legal limit is because there's a statute that says 0.8 is the legal limit. If you're 0.8 or above, you are impaired by law. And there's tons of scientific research that supports that proposition, that anybody who
Right.
has that level of alcohol in their system is per se, their normal faculties are impaired. There was nothing like that for marijuana. And in fact, anecdotally, and I'm sure the viewers have their own stories about, whether people smoking marijuana and driving 20 miles an hour, or, and going too slow or too fast, or whether or not it impairs you or not. But the interesting thing about this case is that there was no evidence of when the ingestion of marijuana occurred. There was no evidence as to whether it was smoked or ingested in some other form, like, eating a brownie or whatever. So, the accident happened in 1999, I think. And this case was litigated in pretrial motions to suppress a couple years later. So this was before the age of recreational marijuana in other states. And, it was still sort of the old school thinking that most people smoke marijuana, and only hippies way back in the past ate brownies, right?
Right.
They weren't really like gummies and lollipops and all the things that they have now.
Right.
And so I felt very strongly in this case that the accident was caused because an 11-passenger van had a catastrophic tire failure in the right rear tire, and what happened was the driver overcorrected and the van flipped, and that the accident had nothing to do with impairment, and certainly not impairment by marijuana or alcohol. So that was the issue in the case, and we spent a lot of time in depositions, hundreds of pages, several experts on both sides, I would say 4 or 5 days of then what's called FRI hearings, which is a hearing to determine whether or not scientific evidence is reliable enough to be admitted into court. And so the judge at the time, Larry Turner, who is a wonderful, one of my mentors, an amazing trial lawyer who'd become a circuit judge, he excluded the evidence. He said he did not believe that the science was developed enough for experts, one of them being Dr. Goldberger of University of Florida, that could testify that someone was impaired at the time of driving and as to the recency of the use of marijuana. So the case went on appeal to the first DCA for a couple years. And Judge Turner, to his credit, let the defendant out of pretrial custody. The case comes back a couple years later. And, you know, the DCA ruled against Judge Turner and said, you know, that this evidence will be admissible. All of our arguments go to the weight that the jury should give the evidence, not the admissibility or the threshold admissibility of the evidence. So at that point, you know, new plea offers were extended. You know, there was a question of whether to go to trial or not. The client chose to go to trial. We had about a 2-week trial, which was interesting because we were in the old courthouse here in Gainesville. And, you know, the state attorney's office and the public defender's office, you know, are underfunded.
Right.
And so we're over there with like chalkboards and whiteboards and trying to explain this incredibly complicated forensic toxicology evidence, and also tire experts, mechanical engineering kind of expert stuff. Across the hall from us, there's a lawsuit going on involving the Budweiser distributorship in Gainesville.
Right.
And they have like dozens of lawyers, and it looked like a concert going on across the hall with all the tech they had and the boxes, you know, technology equipments. And that trial went on for months, probably, where just money's at stake. And here we had a client that was facing, you know, a minimum of, you know, 33 years in prison if she was convicted. And this is a person that worked with severely physically and intellectually challenged people who reside at Charlie. She worked for Peanuts, had worked there forever. You know, wasn't even supposed to come into work the day that the accident happened, and was called in to take the ladies on a field trip. And, you know, I really love, and still do to this day, love that client. And I felt like she was not guilty. And very strongly, I personally believe that this was very wrong, that she was being charged, especially on the evidence. And I was very invested in the case, and we tried it. And she was found guilty. And, you know, she was sentenced to, you know, 34 years in prison. And that was heartbreaking. And fortunately, the assistant state attorney on the case, Mark Peterson, is a wonderful person, good friend.
Yes, Mark is.
He agreed after the verdict, which is pretty much unheard of. He agreed to a motion to modify the sentence to give her a below the guidelines sentence of 22 years. So we went back to the judge after the fact and got it reduced to 22 years, but still 22 years too long, in my opinion. But, you know, that's a pretty magnanimous gesture by him. I've never known another prosecutor ever to do something like that. So that's something that really shaped my career in a lot of ways, because it was after that trial that, you know, sort of became more known and was invited to go into private practice, and, you know, all those things. But it personally impacted me greatly, and that will be a case that I won't ever forget.
Thank you for sharing that, Stacy. That's you know, incredibly compelling story that you told on that. You're saying that that's something you still, right, that affects you to this day?
Yes, it definitely does.
I I remember only, I think I remember talking to you maybe back in the day, about the case itself, and tangentially hearing about it on the news, and tensions, right? You were probably saying the community that was following Danny Rawlings' case, that may have been one of the seminal cases, right? I think in our community on it. It seems like there were tensions, right, that were running, yeah, pretty high. I know a lot of individuals working with ARC, is that right? And the associated groups at Charlie and everything. Thank you for the background on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot more to that story. I mean, you have no idea the number of calls that Johnny Kearns and I got from people who worked at Charlie anonymously because they were afraid to lose their jobs, about how poorly the vans were maintained. This is all in the past. I don't know what they do now. But just everyone felt for the client that got charged, and it was just a true victim of circumstances, in my opinion. Of course, in the opinion of the victim's family, she was, the devil incarnate. But I didn't see it that way through my objective view of the facts. But it also resonated with me, quite frankly, because in my personal life, I have known plenty of people that are recreational users of marijuana, and it was scary for them. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
because I thought the science that was being testified to was junk, right? I thought it was, I didn't think it was reliable, and that somebody who recreationally used marijuana on a weekend and then it gets in a tragic accident on a Wednesday, and now all of a sudden is going to get charged with impairment, with all these unknown factors, about baseline levels of THC and frequency of use and all these things that factor into these levels in blood without any actual broad scientific study of it, that could be replicated, and like there are for the DUI laws, and there's still to this day is no per se level of THC in blood that has been equated to impairment. And back then, which is, the trial was probably 2002 or 3, I might be off on the years, the toxicologist for the state testified that it was imminent, that maybe in the spring, the Forensics Toxicology Association, for the main one for the United States, was going to come out with a per se number that would equate to impairment for marijuana, and they still haven't. Yeah, they still haven't.
Hey, Stacy, I would love, you probably know, or maybe know much more about it than me. I'd love to know the Colorado statistics, on have DUIs gone down, or have they gone, up with the legalization efforts there, I would just love to kind of correlate it, to see, right, could there be some positives, right? Taking it, in that direction. I guess I'm always looking for the positives off of this story is it's tragic on so many different levels, right?
Right.
And what I like about what you talked about, I think, is the humanistic element, if I can say that, right? Stacy, you're putting a humanity into the story, and you're injecting it at the different levels. In your opinion, do you think a good public defender has to have that kind of humanistic attitude to be able to really, does that make sense, to be a great defender?
Yes, I think so. And I think part of our job is to get at first the prosecutor, then maybe the judge, then maybe the jury, and then maybe the judge again, to see the humanity in the case before the court, to see our client as a whole person and not just as some facts that happened on a particular day, and to look at that person and not judge them by just the worst thing that they ever did, and then just be easy. It's easy to write somebody off and say, well, you did this on this date and that's pretty bad, so we're just gonna throw you, to the curb for the rest of your life, and not care about all the collateral consequences to the community, to your family, to the taxpayer or whatever, so I think, yes, you have to be able to not only feel that for the clients that you represent, but be able to communicate that effectively to the other stakeholders in the system so that you can try to come up with a just result. And I know that a just result, is not that every case gets dropped. Of course not. Like people commit crimes, and sometimes they're really bad crimes, and there has to be a consequence. But no matter what, there's always circumstances that led to what happened. There's always the person as a whole that committed the crime. And that needs to be looked at as well, so that you can fashion like a punishment or a sentence that addresses the wrong, maybe tries to fix something going forward so that we're not in this situation again. And then, but also just doesn't throw a person away forever because of a mistake that they made. And that's what we do. And where that line is of course a matter of opinion or perspective or worldview. And some people's opinion is going to be way more harsh than what another person's opinion is. And so we're always trying to find that middle ground of what is the most fair outcome that we've come up with.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's why you're one of my legal idols, is the way you just articulated that I wish I could articulate, that effectively, Stacy. Thank you for those profound thoughts. That actually, and maybe again, you are proactively answered my next question, but if you want to add anything to it, it's thoughts on the future of criminal justice. Yeah, where we've been, where we're headed. What improvements can we make?
Yeah, well, that could be like a series of lunches with Layne, but I think that we've heard some voices for criminal justice reform that are starting to be listened to, right? Whether it relates to mass incarceration or bias in policing, or the sort of unfairness of the monetary bond system that we rely on in this state and in most of this country. So I think some of those voices have been heard and some incremental change has occurred, but there's still a monumental shift that needs to occur. Giving some discretion back to judges on these mandatory sentences, I think is very important. Reform of juvenile direct file. Some of that has happened. There's been some good improvements, but there needs to be more so that we're not taking a 14-year-old and throwing them away forever for, a terrible thing that a 14-year-old brain did, but that the person at 30 would never do again, and those kinds of things. I think funding for the criminal justice system as a whole, but in particular for public defenders, it really needs massive reform, because we can't keep up with the salaries that private firms are paying brand new lawyers. Or even other governmental agencies. We're way down on the list even for governmental agencies of what we pay. And, like my dad's law firm in Fort Lauderdale, Tripp Scott, they're a big, kind of a high-end firm, wonderful firm. But, they're hiring people right out of law school at almost $100,000 a year, and like we're hiring people say, well, you get 50,
right.
With not a big chance of ever making $100,000 a year, by the way, in money. Now, what young people don't see and what's hidden in that salary is, of course, the benefits that come with state employment. But still, we are so far behind in the salary game that we can't recruit enough people, and then we can't keep them because they get plucked away easily. The very good ones, especially plucked away, by private firms after we've invested a lot in them. So that's a big issue, I think, for criminal justice reform. But one of the biggest problems that I see is every time we get going down the road of reform, and there's a lot of voices in Tallahassee talking about it on both the Democratic and Republican side, which when you get the Republican side talking about it, that's a good thing because they're in power, in our state.
Right.
then something bad happens. Some case out there happens.
Always.
And then there's like a knee-jerk reaction to, well, we need to really crack down on this. And now we need a new minimum mandatory, and we need to really pass this law and this law and this law to make whatever happened out here never happen again, which is of course impossible. And what happens then is that all these people get caught in the dragnet of these new harsh laws, and we take 2 steps backward from the half step that we took forward, and so I would like to see a criminal justice system that really addresses the person accused of the crime, or who's convicted of the crime, their history, their circumstance, of course, the victim, what happened and their considerations, but not have it be driven by these mandatory minimums and all these laws that come down from Tallahassee that sound really great on a political ad, but in reality take a tremendous toll on individuals and families and communities in the state, in particular communities of color. And so that's where I think we really need to focus our efforts, is to just keep moving in the right direction and don't go backwards every time some bad thing happens out in the community.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying it like it is, Stacy. I've had individuals that disagree with me on the minority impacts, and I'm like, numbers do not lie. I don't know, what else more, I can say, pull out studies after study after study. You and I know anecdotally between us, right? We've seen those results. And I think what you're saying, the knee-jerk reaction is, the analogy, that maybe I was thinking of is in the Casey Anthony case, well, we'll just sell cars now without trunks. Right. That would be the overreaction, right, to whatever happened. And exactly, what you're talking about. There's something I want to ask you real quick and squeeze this in, but they had a criminal mediation program piloted years ago. I was one of the fortunate individuals to take one case, under it. The pushback that I got from the prosecutors, and this is something I'm trying to understand, they didn't want to sit across the table from the actual defendant. And I don't know if they didn't want to look them in the eye or just too close, so they were worried. But I thought it was a really interesting concept about, potentially putting as you said, the stakeholders in the driver's seat, right? And even separating us in different rooms would have been fine with me, with the mediator, going back and forth. What any thoughts on that at all?
Well, I think, criminal mediation, restorative justice, efforts, which there's some great people in Gainesville trying to, forge the way for reformative justice to occur more frequently in our circuit. I think it's a great idea. I like you, I don't completely understand the resistance to it. I mean, I think in certain cases I can. Okay, in certain cases are not eligible, in my view.
Yeah, of course, I agree.
Restorative justice,
absolutely. Right, just like the civil system
cases, or things you don't want to re-traumatize, a sexual battery victim,
domestic violence, and absolutely.
Well, I don't know. Some violence might be really good for this, but I'm just, there's certain cases that would have to be excluded from that process. But I think, and I know a lot of prosecutors, and I'm friends with them, and I respect them, many of them greatly, but I do think that it's just giving up the power to make the decision, because what you're doing when you agree to go to a mediation is that, I mean, ultimately you don't have to agree, but you're giving up your power, and the other person's giving up a little bit of power, and you're coming to a compromise and a solution that is accepted by someone. Whereas right now the system is so lopsided that it's the total prosecutorial discretion into what they want to charge, whether they want to proceed, what they want to ask for based on what they charge. They don't have to listen to me. Right. They don't have to listen to the victim either. They have to hear the victim in terms of victim having input, But, you know, if a victim, let's say of a domestic violence situation, comes in and says, you know, I don't want to prosecute, I overreacted, this isn't a situation that should be in the criminal justice system, whatever, it's not, they'll tell the victim, no, it's not up to you, it's up to the state, you know. And so I think part of it is just that weird dynamic in criminal law where it's not the same as two parties in a civil case, you know, fighting about money or whatever. It's a little bit different, but you know, you have one player that is just so much more powerful than any other, that why would they go to a mediation, you know, because they think they know the answer. That's part of the issues. They always think they are fair and reasonable and have the right answer to the situation, you know, and we don't agree with that, you know, most of the time. And so our remedy is ask them, beg them, try to make them see, you know, our side, or litigate, you know, through motions, or ultimately go to trial, you know. But then going to trial, sometimes the penalty, if you lose at trial, is so harsh that it's not reasonable to choose to go to trial. And the prosecutors know that. And so I think part of the reform that I like to see is kind of trying to level that playing field a little bit, so that judges have more discretion in sentencing and whether things go to adult court. And it just puts like a check on the prosecutor. And please be clear, I'm not talking about our prosecutor's office necessarily. I'm talking about prosecutors in general. You know, this is an issue nationwide, statewide, and you know, there's got to be a little bit of a check on there. And part of the check is us, you know, through zealous advocacy, but there's got to be more than that, especially when, you know, there's so much risk involved to clients to even take a deposition. This is, oh, you want to talk about legal pet peeves? That was one of your questions.
Yes. Yeah. Leading into that. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of my biggest pet peeves is the no deposition plea offer.
Yep. I remember those.
Right. And I'm okay with that in a lot of routine cases where it's just like, oh yeah, you know, you stole the steak from Winn-Dixie, the steak was in your pocket, you've done it 10 times before.
You did it,
yeah,
yes.
I get that.
Right, yeah.
But there's a lot of cases that depositions need to be taken, you know, especially in, like, let's say self-defense cases, you know. I mean, whether or not someone acted in self-defense, you know, there's a wide range of opinions about whether something's self-defense or whether something's murder. And so if a state attorney comes forward and says, it's my way or the highway, you plead to this, you know, 10, 20 life, whatever sentence I'm offering, or if you go to trial, it's life, that's not right. You know, that's not right. And when there's legitimate issues, they should be able to be explored and without penalty. You know,
I agree with you, because really, right, the prosecutor, you've been on both sides, you know this, the prosecutor's job is to pursue justice, right? It's not to get a conviction or a win, right? So I understand exactly where you're coming. You know what I would love to do? We'll see if Brian is up for this. Get you and Brian on a point counterpoint. You know, I think it'd be great. You guys, the Venn diagram, I mean, overlaps so much anyway, right?
Right.
But it would be interesting to these, you know, these fine issues, like to get some ideas on them and see if there's some shared commonalities. Yeah.
Well, and you know what I'm saying is no deposition plea offers are okay in some cases, maybe a lot of cases, because I understand the resources that are used, and you know, some people just need to make a decision, and all the reasons why. But I'm saying that if we're gonna, every case should be considered on an individualized basis, and there's certain cases where it's this is probably politically incorrect, the he said she said kind of cases, self-defense, where the evidence is could go either way depending on someone's opinion of what self-defense is, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You know, let's explore it, you know, through investigation and fair investigation by the defense, not just, well, the cops saying, we investigated and we think he's guilty, you know?
Right, right, exactly.
So
I like your philosophy. I mean, I really think that attorneys are also like scientists. We like to look at evidence. We like to do the deep dive, right? And find out, right, if those facts, correlate, right? With
right.
the ultimate legal conclusion there on it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It's legal pet peeves. I'm so glad you didn't say, Stacy. Yeah, I don't like mean, angry attorneys. Layne.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like people that smile too much and that are too polite all the time,
Yeah,
Layne.
yeah, literally. Thanks. Let me get from you your inspirations. You named some of them before, some wonderful. I know we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Before, but what have been your inspirations, Stacy?
Probably my biggest inspiration would, it's probably a cliche, but it's probably my parents, and in totally different ways. My mom was just the most fun, kind, biggest hearted person, funny, supportive, never went to college, didn't have a career outside of supporting my dad's political career and raising us kids. And she was just an inspiration for how to be a humble and loving person and how to care about every single person, whether they're highfalutin or whether they're homeless or whatever. She was just an extremely kind person by nature and happy person by nature, like you, Layne. And then of course my dad in a totally different way. My dad was a public servant for probably more years than I can count. He was in the Florida Senate for 28 years. He didn't have to do that. He had a successful law firm, and he just had a commitment to public service, to caring about what was right and to trying to make it happen in government and in life, and a commitment to excellence that I think he passed down to me, and so I admired him. From the time I was 6 years old, he was in the Florida Senate, and I was in Tallahassee a lot, seeing the legislators. And back then there was no term limit, so the people that were there really were giants. They were there forever, a long time. Dempsey Barron, was one of my big heroes when I was a kid. I don't even know his politics, and I don't even care. He was just a larger than life John Wayne kind of figure to me. Was an inspiration. And I met governors, and I heard, just over the dinner table or wherever, just debates about, whether it was the ERA amendment or abortion or Fourth Amendment law, or, whether taxing, income tax for, individuals, or whatever the issues of the day were. Those are the things that are rattling around my head as a kid. And just seeing people that are sacrificing their personal life to expose themselves to be a public figure, which isn't always fun, especially not these days. I think it's gotten worse.
Gosh, yeah. I was going to ask you. You think it's gotten considerably worse, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely. And
The tone.
And I think term limits have been a part of that. I don't think it's been that what people thought it would be. I don't think it's reduced the influence of lobbyists and the private dark money and all that. In fact, I think the opposite has happened. And I think we've lost a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge of how to compromise and what good government looks like, and how to be on opposite sides of this issue and be advocating passionately for opposite sides, and then not have that carry over to every single other issue, which means nothing gets done except for the majority party gets to do whatever they want. I think that's terrible. And that's what's happened since 2000 in Florida. Well, since the term limits started in 2000, and then they've carried through. And I know there's good people, friends of mine, that would disagree with that. That's just what I've seen in Tallahassee, and maybe we need term limits in Washington. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it'd be like me trying to talk about hockey. And no, don't ask me. I have no idea what's going on. But just from my own experience and seeing how it's changed in Tallahassee, in the last 40 years or more, I don't think it's better. And
Thank you,
yeah, so
Stacey.
anyway.
Oh, no, thank you. I have to very quickly remind our viewers that the views expressed today are not those representative of anyone, purely Stacy and Layne talking, and not the University of Florida, the Board of Trustees, the Board of Governors, or the Governor's Office, or the wonderful state of Florida, Stacy. Sorry, I have to drop that in there for, because I'm going to try to keep this video posted. Okay, that is my job. What you're saying, I really think is very important and has incredible validity. And I probably should have dropped it in at the beginning. I will go back and put it on the, the commentary or something below, on it. But
or you can just edit that part out.
I haven't had to edit, knock on wood, Stacy, yet. I suppose, if I'm called on it, we've been given great, I want to thank everybody at the admin and things at the level, we've been given great leeway to talk about a variety of subjects. I don't think they're that controversial. I think they're things that need to be talked about. Like you said, Stacy, gosh, you're being so nice with your time. Let me keep, if I can get 2-3 more minutes out of you, is that okay? Yeah, the fun stuff, favorite music, films or books, or whatever you want to mention there, TV shows, or
Well, I am a huge music fan.
Okay, I know that. Yeah, let me know who's your some favorites.
Well, I have a really eclectic taste in music, I feel like, but my major influences would be like Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson. I like classic rock and jazz, but I love New Orleans music. I'm heavily into anything with funk involved, F-U-N-K. And I love,
You're making me laugh.
Sorry.
You're right. I never know how YouTube's analyzing,
We're zooming here, so
those algorithms, right, are going to pick up. Thank you.
I just love music in general. I go to a lot of live music and hope to get back to doing that soon. Jazz Fest in New Orleans. I'm the person that'll fly somewhere to see a show, of a particular artist that I love. I don't know, films. I'm greatly impacted by the films of my childhood because Star Wars came out when I was 6 or 7, and I probably saw it 5 times the first summer. Like Jaws, The Shining, the Godfather series. I love The Godfather. And this is probably not politically correct, but I'll still admit to loving Woody Allen films.
Oh, it's okay. You can separate the artist and the product, right? Yeah.
I love Annie Hall, Manhattan, so, and I like a lot of the older films like On the Waterfront, Streetcar.
Oh my gosh.
I love Westerns, a sucker for a Western. But so
wow. Gosh,
Renaissance woman, ride horses, bikes, whatever. You can edit that part out, but
Renaissance person. We got you covered. No, that's fine. You're making me laugh too on a Friday afternoon, which I need some mirth, right now. Golly, I wish I could talk to you an hour on all these films, but they're all fantastic. Thank you for being another Woody Allen fan again, and the way I made it sound, I don't want judgment there at all. Woody Allen he is an American treasure. He has made some in terms of cinema product, like I think we can admit it on that level, right?
Yeah.
And has made some absolutely amazing movies and very prolific too, right?
Yes, a lot of movies.
A lot of movies, yeah. It was. I used to go with a friend. He said, "You're the only Woody Allen fan in town, Layne." It was, and Yuko and I would go with him and his wife, to see the Woody Allen movies. But now, Stacy, I know somebody else to invite, so this is perfect. Have you watched that thing with Elaine May and him on? Is it on Prime Video or Netflix? One of them. It's a nice little series if you get a chance.
Oh,
very cute. Oh, very funny. Very cute. Very nice. Achieving a work-home life balance. Stacy, how do you do it? You do so much.
Yeah,
Can you do it?
I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing or how I do it, but it's hard. I think especially for public defenders, you have to be able to be passionate and have empathy for your clients and do the hard work that we do, but you also have to be able to separate your inner self from the trials and tribulations that your clients are facing and not let it get too internal because it's just too overwhelming. And so you have to be able to find a way to separate yourself out from that, and set some kinds of emotional and psychological boundaries. It doesn't always work, by the way.
Yeah,
So, as
right.
you can see,
We're
I've never,
humans.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's just something that you have to be able to do more often than not, I guess, to be able to stay in this work and stay healthy. You have to pursue the things that you love outside of work, whatever those passions are. And I really feel for the young men and women who come into this work and like have a family right away, because I don't know how they do it. Like, when I came out of law school, I had, I didn't have my son until I was 40, and I was 25 when I graduated law school. So I had a lot of years to focus on myself and my career, and it didn't matter what time I got home, and it didn't matter if I had to go on the weekend, and I didn't have to be so disciplined in my time, because I just was like, well, work hard, play hard. That was probably my mentality for a long time. And then when I had my son, I was already, into my career. And so I was able to sort of, I think the balance came more naturally at that point, although I still have to do it. I have to say, my number one priority is my son. And then number two, I'm the public defender,
Yeah,
I'm mom, and then
of
I'm the
course.
public defender. And so I have a lot of respect for these
It-
young men and women that come out of law school and immediately have a family and are trying to search for that balance. And I think it requires a lot of organization and discipline to be able to do that. And you've just got to keep that separate, because otherwise one or the other is going to suffer, either your personal life or your work, if you can't find the right balance.
That wonderful words of wisdom, Stacy, on that. And I wanted also thank you for giving a shout out for your mother. And I was going to say giving a shout out to mothers, but I don't want to be gender biased here. Let me say to those wonderful partners that are at home taking care of the children that are completely, they're never called out for celebration, right? Never recognized or anything, but you and I know it's the hardest job on earth, right? To
Right.
do. So thank you for that. That means so much to me. I was going to mention the Tree of Life, which, if you know, the Brad Pitt movie, kind of a little bit of those things that you were talking about, you had two parents with a little bit differing philosophies, right? And it
Right.
created a balance for you,
Yes.
on it. And I think those are wonderful thoughts. We can make that the closing thoughts if you'd
All
like,
right.
and
Yeah.
wrap it up. And really, really nice there. But yeah, thank you for everything. And Stacy, one thing that you taught me, and this is something I've got to remember so I don't lose my humanity, I would be visiting criminal defendants, in jail or court, and they were facing, like you talked about, very severe sanctions, sometimes up to life, right? And could be worse, but I wasn't doing those kind of cases. But, I would come home and Yuko would say, oh, Layne, they didn't have the Cote de Rhone Pinot Noir tonight. So, we've only got this, American, Pinot, and it's so interesting because it brings me back to that humanity of, do you know what I mean? There are some real hardships out there.
Yeah.
And thank you to you and your office every day for the wonderful work that you do. I cannot thank you enough. I thank you for appearing on Lunch with Layne, and it's nice that we have the bookends, Brian Kramer and yourself, as well. I think this is wonderful. You giving us your thoughts, your philosophies, and sharing it with you. A true humanitarian, Stacy. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Layne. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.